Hello again, this is session 2 of the Phonetics and Phonology introduction. We already saw in the last session a few ideas in phonetics and how we can describe sounds based on how they are produced. We discussed the source of airstream and phonation type, and now we want to cover articulation. As I mentioned in the last session, the IPA is an alphabet which represents the sounds of the human languages, and this is basic knowledge in linguistics. You need to understand IPA and to a certain degree memorize it. It is used internationally in linguistics, and independently of whether you're a phonetician or a discourse analyst, you will have to know some IPA. The IPA is a simple table, can be read easily, and even if you don't know every single symbol, you will be able to understand what they represent if you understand how it works. You should take your time with the table and study it. It'll be in the exam definitely, but you will need it throughout your studies and your career. So this is a complete updated version of IPA. I'll try to make it a little bit larger to tell you a little bit about it. So there are several, let's say, groups of symbols in the IPA. On the top we have the consonants. These are among the most important, and I'll discuss this table later with you. It has a very simple structure. Then here on the right we have the vowel space. Again, this structure of vowels is relatively simple, but I think we'll only do this next session. We'll focus on consonants this session. Then here you have some additional symbols which don't quite fit in here because these are non-pulmonic. So as I mentioned last session, pulmonic consonants are the most common ones, but you also have non-pulmonics. You have clicks, voiced implosives, and ejectives. There are some additional symbols which don't quite fit anywhere. We will discuss this to a certain extent, or at least I will mention them. Then you have some suprasegmental indications here. These are, for example, length, or whether something's half long or extra short. You have stress, both secondary stress, which is underneath, and primary stress, which is on top. This is the transcription, for example, of phonetician. You have some ways of writing tones, which is sometimes used. Sometimes people who transcribe tones use a different system. And then you have some diacritics. There are many diacritics. Here are the most important ones. Sometimes you will find other diacritics for certain language groups. The most important ones are voiceless and voiced, and we will discuss today aspiration. You can see here we already spoke about breathy voice and creaky voice, and you don't have to memorize all of these, but some of these are quite important. So palatalization is quite important, voicing is very important, aspiration is very important, and I'll give you some examples at some point of these diacritics. But in any case, this is the IPA, and as I mentioned, you need to memorize completely the structure of the IPA and to some degree the symbols within the IPA. So how? So again, what are we talking about? These are very concrete symbols of sounds in the world's languages. There are many different symbols, and they are fairly precise in describing how things are pronounced. And you can see here, for example, Spanish and English share the same symbol, the difference being that in Spanish, as I mentioned, this is not a distinct phoneme, it's just a realization of one phoneme. While in English, this the, which is this th sound, is in fact a phoneme. So remember, the most important distinction we had was voiceless versus voiced. If you remember the symbol, this from the last video, and this is also present in the structure of pulmonic consonants. So we will focus first on pulmonic consonants, and then other types of phones in the IPA. So there are three dimensions to pulmonic consonants. One is manner of phonation, manner of pronunciation, which is on the rows. The other is place, which is on the columns, and then there's voice, which I was just telling you about, and that is given by the position of the symbol within a column. So voiceless sounds are on the left and voice sounds are on the right. Some symbols do not have a corresponding voiceless sound because they are not found as phonemes in languages around the world. So only things which are found as phonemes get their own symbol. That doesn't mean that they don't occur. If they do occur, for example, an m, which is voiceless, then you transcribe that with a diacritic. So this is very difficult to picture like this, just by looking at it. So we will come to some examples. I find it much easier. So the distinction between these two sounds, which you'll be familiar with, is just voicing. So listen.
Ba, a ba, ba, a ba.
So the place of articulation and the manner of articulation of both P and B is identical. It is bilabial, which means with both lips at the same time, and it's applosive, which means that there is a complete obstruction of the air. But in B, the vocal folds vibrate, while in P, they don't. And you can try this by placing your hand on your larynx, as I mentioned in the last video. Same happens with T and D.
Da, a da, da, a da.
And you can hear that. And for example, with velars, K and G.
Ga, a ga. Aga, aga.
Right? So you can hear it there. So that's voicing, and that's the way it's represented in the IPA. Now we come to the articulators, and the articulators are many. The most important distinction is between oral versus nasal, and for articulating nasal sounds you need to open the nasal cavity, and this is done by the velum, which closes or opens to allow air to pass through the nasal cavity. Then you have some passive articulators, which are the alveolo-palatal region here, the alveolar region, which is just behind your teeth, the dental region, which are your teeth. The labials are pronounced with the lips, as the name indicates. Then you have the tip and the blade of the tongue, the body of the tongue, the back and the root. You have the velum and the uvula, which is this place here. And you also have the pharynx, which you can use to pronounce some consonants. So, as I just mentioned, these articulators create the place for articulation. So you have your active articulators, which are the ones that mostly don't move, like the teeth or the palate, they don't move, and the active ones, which are the tongue, which actually moves, and the velum. Now, these are basically all the places of articulation you can use, and again, I'll show you in the table which is easier to understand. So you have bilabials, which are articulated with both your lips at the same time. Again, something like
ba, a ba,
you have labiodental, which are articulated with both the lower lip and the upper teeth, and this is how you pronounce an F.
a fa,
Then you have dentals. This is, for example, the Spanish sound of th or the English sound the.
tha, a tha,
You have alveolars, which is just s or z or t and the. You have then post-alveolars. This is sh or j. Then you have retroflexes. I really can't do this very well.
sha, a sha, ja, a ja,
You have palatals like sh and y.
xia, a xia, ya, a ya,
You have velars like k and g, which I showed you, or n
na, a na,
and h and r.
ha, a ha, ra, a ra,
And then you have uvulars. These are difficult to pronounce for speakers who don't have them in their native languages, but they are common in German, for example.
ra, a za,
And you also have the trill version.
ra, a ra,
This is the French R, for example. You have some plosives. These are found in Semitic languages, for example.
ga, a ga, ga, a ga,
And nasals.
na, a na,
Right. So those are all the places of articulation that you need to learn and know about. And as you see, it's quite systematic. The left is the most frontal one, bilabial, and to the right the most. Oh, I'm sorry. And we also have pharyngeals and glottals. So to the most to the right is the more backwards in your mouth it is. So here you have some glottals. That's a glottal stop. And you have these fricatives.
ha, a ha, ha, a ha,
Again, and then some pharyngeals.
ha, a ha, ra, a ra.
Right. So that's for that. Yeah, this is what I just mentioned. And then there's the manner of articulation. There are, as I suggested before, or as I said before, two main manners of articulation, one being oral and one being nasal. And the difference is in the velum. So with the velum raised, the sound is completely oral because all the air goes through your mouth. While if the velum is lowered, then it becomes a nasal because some of the air goes through your nasal cavity. And you can distinguish this if you, for example, put your hand in front of your nose and you pronounce an oral consonant like P, like paint. No, that's not good. Paste. Then you should feel no air coming from your nose. However, if you say some nasal like my, then you should feel a little bit of air coming from your nose. Right, so here's your nasal cavity, this is the velum, and to pronounce oral sounds, then you raise it and you block all the air coming from the nasal cavity and everything goes through your oral cavity. And if you lower it, then some air will go through your nasal cavity. So here are some of the nasals. Let's go back to the sounds because I think it's easier. So let's go back here. Right, this is a simple M, like in mine or my. You also have a labiodental version of this, which is with your lower lip and your upper teeth, ma.
ma, amma,
This is just N. This is the retroflex version of N, which is common in languages of the Indian subcontinent.
na, anna,
Then you have a palatal. This is in Spanish, for example, ñe.
nya, anya,
This is quite common in German also, like how you pronounce hunger.
na, anna,
Right. Yeah, that's about it. And the evolar
no, anna,
All right. So this is relatively rare. It's present in some languages like Japanese. So stops. In a stop, there is a complete closure of the oral cavity, and the air is completely blocked. At some point in the mouth or in the glottis, and then it's rapidly released. So you have voiceless and voice stops. Sorry for that. Right. The stops are the plosives. They also include nasals, but we usually mean plosives when we say stops. So P and B are fairly common, T and D. Then the retroflex versions.
da, da, da,
Then you have palatal stops.
dya, dya, dya.
The velar versions you should be familiar with, which is K and G. There's the evulars again.
Ga.
Right. So then we have fricatives, and for fricatives there is a continuous airstream. However, it is highly restricted. So it's not a full closure like the stops, but there is some degree of closure. Let's go back. I'll show you. These are the most common and more abundant ones. This will be rather rare for you if you don't speak Spanish, for example. Spanish has this.
Va, va, fa, fa.
These are pronounced both with both your lips. And this is the common f and v.
Fa, va.
So fünf or Wein in German. This is the Spanish th.
Tha, tha.
And the voiced version.
The, the.
And then you have your s and z sounds and sh and j sounds, etc. I won't show you all of them. You can look at them, but you can see the point. There is a continuous flow of air. It is highly restricted at some place. Can be your lips, your labiodental region, dental region, alveolar region, etc. And that's what creates the sound. Now there's another type of sound which we call affricates, which are basically the combination of two sounds, a full stop and an fricative, which are homoorganic, meaning that they are pronounced at the same place of articulation and the same articulators. These are fairly common. You know them, for example, in cheer or church. You articulate the T and the sh at the same time, and they together form a phoneme, or job and jump. And in German, Zeit and Pfeife. Things like hexe are not actually affricates. Right. So these are the manner of articulation I just mentioned. There are some additional ones we will look at. But for example, so the point of this is that we can describe sounds consonants, consonantal sounds, according to the phonation, their place and their manner. So if, for example, you see a B, we can describe it as being a voiced consonant. It's bilabial because it's pronounced with both the lips, and it's a plosive because that's the manner of articulation. The M is a voiced bilabial nasal, etc. And this will be an exercise for the exam, so you should practice this. Here's an example you can practice for pneumonia, and then the other way around. We can give you a description of the sound, and you have to figure out what the symbol is. So in this case, that's a voiceless bilabial plosive. It's a P. That's a voiced alveolar nasal. That's a voiced labial intranasal. That's a voiced alveolar affricate. And the other way around, the voiceless postalveolar fricative is a sh, and that's the symbol. A voiced labial-dental fricative is v, and that's the symbol. A voiced velar plosive is g, and voiced postalveolar affricate is j. So you should practice this. You can use the page I gave you for the International Phonetic Alphabet Association and do this on your own. This will help you understand and learn IPA much better and much easier. So another type of articulation which is very important is aspiration. And aspiration happens in some languages after a certain vocal stops, where there is some additional kind of voicing happening after the stop finishes. And this lack of voice is a release of air, and this is aspiration, and this is transcribed as a small uppercase H after the consonant. Some examples of unaspirated consonants, something like spat, stab, skid, versus the aspirated version, the ped, tab, kid. I'm really bad at pronouncing aspiration because Spanish doesn't have it, but let's hear it. So this is an example from English. The first one in pin is aspirated, the other ones aren't.
Pin, spin, bin, nip, nib.
So again, listen to the first one.
Pin.
That's an aspirated P. We can hear the same in Hindi.
Dal, thal, dal, dhal.
The first word is unaspirated, the second one is aspirated. So we hear again.
Dal, thal, dal, dhal.
You can hear very clearly that there's some additional puff of air after the consonant. And in English again, distant versus distaste. The first one is unaspirated. You see it here, the transcription. The T has no symbol, but here for distaste, the T is aspirated, and you can hear it.
Distend, distaste.
There's a small difference. It's quite important for some languages, so it's worth it to learn this diacritic. Right. And here's the diagram of what happens in an aspirated consonant. The point is that the vocal folds spread. So for the P, the vocal folds spread. For the voicelessness, and the vocal folds are still spread while the lips are open for the E. And this voicelessness continues during the initial articulation of the vowel. And this is exactly what happens, what causes the aspiration, this extended openness of the folds. Right, now we come to another type of sound, which are laterals. In laterals, the air stream passes around the tongue, basically, and along the lower sides of the tongue. The tongue tip is raised and the body is lowered, and most laterals are voiced. Voiceless laterals do happen, but we usually have to mark them as a diacritic. So let's go back. We have the lateral here. We have either approximants or affricates. The approximant is the normal L. We have a retroflex version.
La, Allah,
We have a palatal version,
Ya, Ayah,
a velar version,
La, Allah,
and the affricate versions are here.
Ashla, Azla.
Yeah. All right. Yes. We have a group of sounds which are called rhotics, and these comprise 3 types of sounds. I'll do it again here because it's easier to understand. So we have trills, we have taps, and we have approximants. The approximant is the English one,
Era, Ara,
this ra sound, and a retroflex version also exists.
Ra, Ara,
It's slightly different with the tip of the tongue a little bit further back. Trills are multiple vibrations in the of the either tongue or the uvula. This is Spanish,
Ra, Ara,
so it should be quite familiar if you speak Spanish. And you also have a uvular version, which is the French version,
Ra, Ara,
right? And you also have a tap or a flap,
Era, Ara,
which is only one tap. So while the trill is multiple times, the tap is just only one tap. And you also have a retroflex version of the tap.
Ara, Ara.
Yeah, that's basically it. These are the flaps and the trills I just mentioned. All right. One interesting characteristic of liquids and nasals is that they can be syllabic. Syllabicity is expressed with this diacritic, and the point is that in some cases they can play the role of a vowel in a sound, in a word. For example, bottle doesn't quite have a vowel, but the L acts like a vowel in the syllable after the T. There's an interesting example, I think, is Bulgarian, which has Vulk, which is wolf, and it doesn't have any vowels. It just has syllabic L. This is again all the diacritics that we have. There are quite a few to modify consonants or vowels depending on where I pronounce. I will mention some of those later. The most important ones are voiceless, which is this small circle here, voice, which is this small symbol under the consonant, breathy voice, which is a double dot, creaky voice, which is this squiggly line, palatalization, which is a J on top of the consonant, velarization, which is this symbol on top of the consonant, and yeah, those are the most important ones and the ones you will have to remember. Oh, and syllabicity of a consonant. Right, so you can practice again. Try doing it, try pausing and try doing this with the table. Right, so this is a voiceless alveolar lateral approximant. There's a voiced uvular trill, and a voiced retroflex flap is the symbol here, and an aspirated voiceless bilabial plosive is this symbol here. And this is important, this will be in the exam, please practice. Right, if you want to read more about this, you can read O'Grady et al.'s Contemporary Linguistics, an introduction. If you have any questions or comments, you can write to me or ask the tutors during the tutorials. Thank you.